The French writer Albert Camus wrote this one sentence. That's the best sentence he ever wrote because it's based on a spiritual realization. And he wrote, "In the depths of winter, I finally learned that there was in me an invincible summer." And obviously, winter and summer are used metaphorically. In the depths of winter, I finally learned. Finally means he spent quite a long time in the depths of winter. I finally learned that there was in me, or maybe he said there is in me, because that is the timeless. If he didn't say is, he should have said is, would have been even better. In the depths of winter, I finally learned that there is in me an invincible summer. And of course, summer refers to the inner state of transcendence, of spaciousness, where a sense of aliveness, a peace, not an asleep peace, but a vibrantly alive peace, emanates, and goodwill, lovingness, a sense of connectedness, all emanates from that transpersonal, to use that word, transcendent perhaps, but it's transpersonal too, because it transcends the person. This was the entire, on our days here, that's the essence of what this is all about, as you know, the realization of the transcendent dimension within yourself. And so you live, your life is then a balance between dealing with things on the personal level, being a person, using the person. It's your form, identity, it's fine. You have to honor that also. It has its shortcomings. And you become compassionate with that. My form identity has lots of shortcomings. Not answering emails is only one of them. But there are those shortcomings, once you connect with the deeper dimension within yourself, they are not seriously dysfunctional anymore, in the sense that they would create suffering for yourself or others. But there are certain idiosyncrasies and things that could be better, and perhaps you can improve on the level of form. There are many things you can do. But if you add something here, you might lose something there. So you're never full. That completion on the level of form is just not possible and not necessary. And there's always something else you can do to explore, to acquire, to learn. And yet the essence of you is already absolutely complete, and you don't need time to be yourself. You already are yourself fully on the level, on the formless. I call that essence identity. Your form identity, your essence identity. The invincible summer in this sentence by Camus, that metaphor refers to your essence identity. The winter is the suffering that the form identity undergoes, but if he hadn't spent a lot of time in the depths of winter, as he calls it, he probably wouldn't even have found the invincible summer in him. Just as many of you, if you hadn't spent time in suffering and had not had deep challenges, you wouldn't even be here. I know I wouldn't. One thing you need to be careful about, the moment you start to speak, you remember last night we looked at ways of interacting to bypass the mind, which quickly can bring up the ego. The ego is mind-based, a mind-based sense of identity, and we saw these video clips where people just looked at another human, so you bypass all that, so it's easier if you're not even engaging in any dialogue, so you're not even attempting to connect on the conceptual level, which can quickly, completely pull you into that dimension of thought and back into ego. The moment you completely identify with the thought, it becomes part of your ego. Thought in itself is not ego, it's just thought. Complete identification with a thought that arises would be part of your ego. Emotion is not ego, but complete identification with an emotion that arises will become part of your ego. So the ego is complete identification with form, which and the primordial form is thought form. Of course, the ego also identifies with the physical form, but more importantly, underlying that is identification with thought forms. So the danger is, yes, to be present when you are not being challenged by other humans and interacting with other humans on a verbal level. It's easier. The challenge comes the moment you start to engage in a conversation with someone. And then the challenge is to have some of your awareness in the underlying awareness, stillness, to be aware of that underlying spaciousness. So there is not complete loss of stillness even while you speak. That's a skill you can. It requires vigilance to see that you are not dragged along with a mind stream as soon as you start to open your mouth and words come out. So you're very present, and then somebody says something, and then you, and you're gone. And then it gets worse because the other person has a slightly different opinion, and then it amplifies your mind stream. and then, because it's all, you're just totally in your form identity, and something is terribly important now, something has become so important, much more important than anything else, like your essence identity, it's disappeared completely. Within 3 minutes, 2 minutes, it's gone. Because there was, for example, a slight difference of opinion that became so important. You needed to show that your viewpoint is absolutely the right one, and then all your energy flows into that assertion of yourself. Ego. You don't know it. It's the ego. You want to. The opinion doesn't really matter. I mean, who cares if you are right or he is right? It's just a game of thought, and in most cases, it makes no difference to any situation. But it is the desire of the egoic identity to assert itself and to emerge victorious. It's unconscious. It's an unconscious movement. But you can see that even in relatively insignificant exchanges between two people, even if the viewpoint slightly differs, there's a force behind the way in which you express your mental position, your viewpoint. It's not just presenting your perspective, your viewpoint, or your mental position. If you are vigilant, it's of course much easier to observe in another. You can start by doing that. The force behind what people say is completely superfluous, unnecessary, but there is another dimension. It's not just what people are saying. They may be doubting what you've said and they express it. It's not just that, because that in itself would be a neutral thing. You put forward your perspective and said, I believe your viewpoint is not quite right, here's mine. That in itself it's neutral, there's no egoic involvement, it's just there's an awareness behind it. In the way, say that the Android data last night in the video clip, in the same way that he presented his viewpoint, there was no force behind it because he's egoless, he's not human. He's egoless, so in that sense there's no force behind what he said. He just presented clearly the situation as he saw it. And with humans that is not easy, so it requires great vigilance. I'm always surprised when I observe humans interacting. My initials are E.T., so I call them human. I'm always surprised when I observe humans how quickly this force flows into what they say. So there's not just whatever their opinion is, whether they question yours or whatever it may be. It's not just that in itself is completely harmless. But there is a force behind it that is aggressive in a way. Even if it's not obviously aggressive, there is that element in what they say. Why? Because you have identified with the arising thoughts, which means lack of awareness. Awareness has been lost, or a better way of putting it, perhaps, awareness has been obscured or covered up. And all there is to you now is that movement of thought. And therefore, you've identified with it. Your consciousness has completely been hijacked by thought forms. And then you identify it, and then you're really not defending or anymore your position, or you are fighting to triumph as an form identity against the other who has a slightly different opinion. So there's not just what you say, there's the energy behind it, and there's a force behind it. And that's that is the loss of presence or loss of awareness that can easily happen the moment you start interacting. So it's so important to be vigilant when you start interacting on a conceptual, verbal level with people. As long as you're just gazing into their eyes, it's relatively easy to be egoless. If you can surrender, it's lovely. You actually feel the connectedness. And you don't have, unless you're extremely neurotic, you don't have that force. You're free of that when you interact with your dog or your cat, because he or she is not talking back at you. So you don't need to defend your positions. And this is why some people find it easier, almost liberating, to be in the company of an animal compared to the company of a human. And some people say, I'd rather just be with my dog. I don't think it becomes so disenchanted with human interaction, but they don't realize, if you looked at yourself, see what you contribute to this interaction, and that it doesn't have to be like that. So your practice is, and one reason why on some retreats complete silence is imposed as a general rule. There are some retreats when you're not supposed to talk at all to anybody except when you ask a question, if there are questions. Here I leave it up to you. Some people prefer that. But it's actually quite good to still be able to interact. If you don't want to be in silence, it gives you a chance. Interacting with people gives you a chance to observe yourself while you interact with people on a verbal level. And so this is a challenge that I suggest that you embrace that challenge as you go back into your daily life and treat human interaction as a practice to stay present even while you speak. The alertness needs to be there so that in addition to the thoughts that you are expressing to the other person, there's a continuing awareness of the underlying presence in yourself. Another way of putting it, you could say there are little spaces in between the thoughts. You express something, and even when you come to the end of a sentence, there's a momentary gap. In that momentary gap, the mind is still. Then you start speaking again. And while you listen to the other person, you're alert and still. So you're not dragged into a mind stream. You're able to use the mind and use words without identifying. Identifying means your sense of self becomes lodged in them. So you speak, which are verbalized thoughts, without identifying with the thoughts. That is the skill, and that is how you stay present during an interaction, which is a vital skill, because otherwise the only time you can be present or conscious is when people leave you alone and you're not being challenged by anybody. And then you say, okay, well, I need more alone time to really practice. No. To really practice and to deepen your practice, you need to bring it into your interactions with people. If you had more alone time, I mentioned it briefly the other day, if you lived in a beautiful cabin halfway up the mountain, somebody brought you food once or twice a day, nothing to worry about, yes, you would be able to sustain a certain level of presence that's probably greater than you would be able to sustain in your daily life, but it wouldn't go very deep. At the slightest challenge, you would lose it again. So then you would have to demand that life no longer challenges you, but that's just not going to happen. So it's so important in your interactions with people to always realize what in my interaction, it doesn't matter what it is, in my interaction, what is it that really matters? What is of primary importance and what is of secondary importance? Most people have no idea about that. They believe whatever they are talking about is of primary importance, but it's not. Of primary importance is your underlying state of consciousness while you speak, because that determines the whole nature and quality of the interaction. So the primary importance is to remain aware while you speak, to have whatever words you want to use to point to it, express it, whether you use Gurdjieff's self-remembrance or use the word presence or alert stillness in the background, you know what it is. And that of primary importance is to bring this dimension into every interaction, and that connects you also with the other human on the level of essence identity. And then in every encounter, you could say that what really matters is the meeting between two humans, and to meet the other on the level of essence identity. And from there, what if of secondary importance, whatever the subject matter is that you need to deal with, whatever it is, whether it's just an exchange of opinions, to clarify something, to come to a decision about something, to tell a person that something is wrong, that could be something could be done about it. Pointless to tell a person that something's wrong if nothing can be done about it. That's just more ego, and that would not come in anymore if you remain aware. So in any encounter, if you want to bring the transcendent dimension into your whole life, which is vital, what really matters, whatever you are discussing or talking about with another person, is of secondary importance. All that evaporates very quickly anyway. Whatever is important now, next year, in some cases tomorrow, in some cases next month, next year, or in 100 years' time, which isn't that much, will be of no importance whatsoever. Remember the video from last night, the street scene. They're all, whatever they were engaged in, and they thought it was terribly important. And now, nobody remembers their names, except Emperor William, but that doesn't help him either. So they're all gone, and they thought, but the one thing that remains is consciousness. And humanity as a whole is growing in consciousness. As you grow in consciousness, it's an expression of the growth of consciousness of humanity. And that does not go away. That is the one thing that is what matters, is the awakening of consciousness. So don't be deceived by your mind telling you that something that you're talking about is of absolute importance. It may be important. The way I put it is, it may be relatively important, but it's not absolutely important. It's not absolutely important because in a year's time or in 10 years' time, it will be meaningless, if not already tomorrow. So most things that actually people discuss becomes meaningless very quickly. So always remembering primary importance, secondary importance. Course in Miracles, which is a lovely, one of the few, there are some channeled works that are quite profound and not that many, but Course in Miracles is one of them. And that is, it says, whenever you meet somebody, it's a holy encounter. Well, I would like to add the word potentially to it. Because in most cases, it's anything but a holy encounter. And it all starts with the interaction between two humans. How larger the collectives interact, groups of humans interact with other groups of humans, how nations interact with other nations. It all is based on the individual makes up the collective. So if the individual is not conscious in interaction with another person, how can the collective be conscious? In fact, the collective is even more unconscious than the individual. And the greatest insanity is always found in the collective consciousness. The collective consciousness is, to some extent, a reflection of the state of consciousness of all those people who make up the collective. But there's an additional factor. When you bring these people together, it's not that you meet at the lowest level of consciousness. The consciousness is the collective is even more unconscious than the various people that make up the collective. That is why the greatest atrocities are not committed by individual criminals or crazy people, murderers and so on. What they do is relatively few people are murdered by individual murderers or crazy individuals. The greatest amount is murdered by collectives, by governments, by normal people forming a collective, and then everybody gets dragged down to an even lower level than their normal state of consciousness, and then the collective is responsible for, and they're all respectable citizens. They're not the people who commit atrocities within the collective are respectable citizens. There's a war situation, or there's the government tries to eliminate certain groups of people within their country in order to create a better world. They all want to create a better world. Those who are out, who are killing, all we need is to eliminate all those people, and then the world will be a better place. We just need to kill 2 million people, and then the world will be a better place. But it all goes down really to the individual. How does the individual interact with another? So now that I've said this, you will inevitably be more conscious of when you can observe it in others. You can say the force behind what they say. And you can observe that. And then in yourself, a bit more difficult. There was a Roman writer, I don't remember who it was, or philosopher. He actually said it would be helpful if you had a mirror and you could see yourself talking and so on, and that is true. If you could have a camera that records how you interact with people, that could be quite shocking to some when you see yourself interacting. So, but that's probably not within the realm of possibility. The camera needs to be your awareness in the background. Reactivity is also part of that. When a challenge happens, it can bring up the reactivity, the fear that lies at the basis of the ego. So be aware of the way in which you react to events, what people say, the mental emotional reaction, the force behind your reaction. So it's just so interesting if you just consider the rest of your life an extension of the retreat, so that you continue to practice. And then, when you are not interacting with people, but you are alone, wherever it may be, whether it's when you leave here and you've come here and then you are alone while you travel back home, and then so on, practice. Don't always go to the usual thing that you see when people are alone. They're never really alone anymore these days. They're alone with their cell phone, their device. So they're everywhere. That aloneness, you don't need to be alone anymore. They say you can always take out your phone and interact. So you never get out of the conceptual mind. When the moment you're alone, you pull out your phone and look at your emails, text messages, Facebook postings, Twitter messages, Pinterest, all kinds of things that I don't even know about. And there's more and more to fill up your mind, so you don't need to feel alone. But to be alone is a wonderful thing too. It's there where you can most easily find the spaciousness that later, if you can't find it when you're alone, how are you going to sustain presence when you start interacting with somebody? So the basis for sustaining presence when you're interacting with another and you're being challenged not only by their mind, but primarily challenged by your mind, the basis for that is, can you be present when you are alone? But if you refuse to be alone because the moment you're alone, you pull out your phone and interact with the device, which means you remain trapped on the conceptual level continuously, then you're missing great opportunities for being present. So resist the temptation of always, it's an automatic thing for many people these days. The moment nothing is going on, they look at that. Sometimes you may have to, of course, and that's fine. Not saying never look at it. There may be a time for 5 minutes, you spend 5 minutes looking, and then you're still traveling wherever you are, on a plane or on a bus or even driving your car. Great opportunity for being present when you're driving. And you're just alert and you look around, you see the road. Peripherally, you see other things. don't worry, you won't go, when you're present, you're driving, you're not going to go, oh, that's so beautiful. When you're truly present, you're less likely to have an accident. Usually the accident happens when you're completely absent. A certain degree of absence is normal when you're driving because it's automatic. But some people get so absent that after a while they don't even know where they are anymore. You can get so absent. So all these opportunities for whenever you're waiting, just be. Either use one of the portals if you have to, or it may be that you don't have to use any portal. You can just be alert, present, and look around. Use your senses. Be aware of the world around you. And that brings in spaciousness, because when you're aware of the world around you and you discover that it's actually quite beautiful and interesting and alive, then it's not just about the sense perception. The sense perception enables you to be present, and you become aware while you're perceiving the world around you. You become aware of your own, it's not your own, I just call it your own for the time being. You become aware of your own underlying awareness. So there is in the background you as the presence, and you can sense yourself as the presence, spacious. And that spacious presence, that is your essence identity, is the background for your sense perceptions. You listen, whatever sounds there may be, you see, sense on your skin, sunlight, the warmth of the sun, or breeze. You breathe in the air. You're present with all the senses. Sometimes one sense predominates. For most people, the visual is the predominant. The next one is the auditory, and then come the other senses. So you may be more focused on the visual and the auditory than the others. That's fine. And so you experience the two dimensions, which is the sense-perceived world and the consciousness behind it all as yourself. So there's a stillness that comes into your sense. And that is, you need to practice that, because, as I said, how can you stay present when you start talking to somebody if you can't be present when you're alone? So use the aloneness time, the alone time, as part of your practice. Some people are scared of being alone. But if you are able to go deep enough within and find this dimension that Camus called the invincible summer in you, which is the spaciousness, the stillness, then loneliness suddenly becomes... Loneliness is a negative term. Nobody wants to be lonely. But when you become comfortable with yourself, your own being, and you can only be comfortable when you can sense yourself in that dimension, then loneliness becomes solitude. And solitude is something beautiful. It's vital to be comfortable with yourself, to have any true relationship that works. You need to have the ability to be comfortable in your own skin, to be able to enjoy moments of aloneness, to enjoy being with yourself, which really means being yourself, your essence self, sensing the consciousness that you are, the awareness that you are. And that is actually joyful state or realization. If you haven't found that, you will always look for another human being to give you what you can only find within. And then you will find that no human being can give that to you. And then if you are unconscious, you will blame that human being for not being able to give it to you, because you will think you made a huge mistake in finding that person. So you will, this is a very common cause of dysfunction in relationships, or the main cause of dysfunction in relationships is you look to the other to give you something that no other can give, which is make you feel at ease with yourself. And so unconsciously, many relationships after a while reach that level of dysfunction where each blames the other. And they don't exactly know why, but underlying it is very commonly the accusation, that unconscious accusation in most cases, you are not giving me what you're supposed to give me. You're not making me happy. You were supposed to make me happy. That's why we signed that contract. And you are not living up to this contract anymore. You were here to complete me, to free me from my habitual unhappiness. So, to be comfortable with yourself, if those of you who are not in a relationship and you are unhappy about not being in a relationship and believe that you will need a relationship to be really happy, first of all, remember that huge amounts of people are unhappy in wanting to get out of a relationship. So all those unhappy people can be divided into two groups: those who want to get out, and others want to get in. Now, as you probably know, there is a huge amount of unhappiness within relationships, unhappiness generated by ultimately by your own mind, but seemingly generated by relationships. So it's your choice: be unhappy in the relationship or be unhappy outside the relationship. So if you believe that in order to be happy, or you cannot be fulfilled unless you have a relationship, first of all, find out and make sure that you can be at ease with yourself being alone. To find that level of you actually can enjoy being alone. Not continuously, but when you're alone, because you won't, even if you're not in a relationship, the so-called intimate relationships, you will have relationships with other people at work and so on, other family members perhaps, friends and so on. And then there will be times when you're actually alone, either sitting on a plane or on a bus or waiting somewhere or in your room after you get home, or after any moments, there will be moments of being alone, and those are actually very precious. So instead of internally attempting to escape from that moments of being alone, go more deeply into that aloneness. Go more deeply into that and come to bring your attention into the present moment, so that you're not, it's uncomfortable for the conceptual mental self, the egoic self, it's uncomfortable to be alone. It needs some more stimulus to keep itself going. What can I think about now? What problem can I think about now? What problem can I make now? I have to pick up the phone and talk to somebody about how problematic things are. or look at this. What can I? What's the next thing? You're always it's so uncomfortable being alone. Can't stand it. Let's look at. Oh, there must be another text message coming. Or you send some. At least you're doing something now. You're connecting with somebody. What's up? And then a minute later comes the answer. Cling. Oh, just hanging out. Okay. Something is happening. So if you're not conscious, there's a continuous attempt to escape from being alone. But if you don't escape, then actually there's the possibility of becoming still and alert and present and starting to look around and feeling your aliveness in the inner body, feeling your own presence. And it's good to feel yourself to realize that you are conscious. Oh, I'm conscious. You are consciousness. You are the essence of you. There is the light of consciousness, and you perceiving the world. That's why Jesus said, "You are the light of the world." What's he saying when he says, he said, "I am the light of the world," and he said, "You are the light." He made both statements. Of course, they're both true. Everybody can say that of him or herself. I am the light of the world. And Jesus told others, "You are the light of the world." What does it mean? You're the light of the world. It obviously can only mean one thing. You are, in essence, the consciousness in which the whole world arises. And so why did he say that to people? Because he wanted them to realize it experientially for themselves. That was the whole teaching, was the kingdom of heaven. And as we saw the other day, heaven, he used the analogy of heaven, which is sky in most languages, to express the state of formless awareness, spaciousness, no form. That dimension is in you, he said. Didn't use the word dimension, but it's my translation of kingdom. And that's all that matters, finding that. Everything else comes second. That's the foundation. So, being alone is vital until you get that point where you actually not only become comfortable with yourself in moments of aloneness, but you can actually intensely enjoy those moments of aloneness. And if your family background is such that you almost never have moments, unless you might have a family, you have with children, so it may be actually that there are very few moments of aloneness that naturally arise, but you will probably find that some do naturally arise, but if they don't, then create some. It is possible, they don't have to be long, 5 minutes. Anybody, no matter what their life situation is, can, well, unless you're in prison cell together with many others, then that becomes your challenge and you have to go deeper there. But most people are able to find moments of aloneness. Either they come to you naturally or you create them. Don't have to be long. And once you are comfortable with being alone, then you will be able to experience a relationship, if you don't want to have one now, an intimate relationship. You will be able to experience an intimate relationship as satisfying. Not without challenges, not that whoever you are with is never going to irritate you anymore. Irritations may arise occasionally and then they subside, and that you're aware, and that's fine, nobody's perfect, including yourself on the form level. But then a relationship, when you don't look to a relationship to make you happy anymore, because the happiness can only arise, I don't often use the term happiness for it, it's something deeper, can only arise from within you in the present moment when you touch your essence identity, when you touch that which is beyond thinking, when your mind becomes still and presence remains, the unconditioned, the invincible summer in you, and that is there. That's where the true so-called happiness, joy, contentedness, peacefulness, sense of aliveness resides, emanates from. And then you don't have to look to a relationship for that. Then the relationship can be an added bonus, an adding on. And actually Jesus used that expression, seek only the kingdom of heaven, all else will be added onto you. Whatever else comes into your life is an adding on. You don't need it for your happiness or fulfillment, but it's quite pleasant. You can actually enjoy not only the relationship, you can enjoy success when it comes. It'll come and go, but when it comes, you enjoy success, professional, of whatever kind. You're doing well, your work is going well, you can enjoy it. You get a promotion, or you create a company that's doing well. All these things are adding ons. If you look to any of those things, not just the relationship, but to any of the things as the ultimate answer to your underlying dissatisfaction, then it's not going to work. No success that you could achieve, or acquisition or possession, can be the ultimate answer to an underlying sense of discontent or lack or insufficiency that is there not for the reason you think, it's there for the reason that you are not in touch with the depths of your being. That's the reason, not that. And then you can live with the comings and goings, the ups and downs of life, because success may happen today or tomorrow, and a year later the opposite of success may happen. So you experience ups and downs, you receive things and then things are taken away. That's just, you can be with that. You will acknowledge the goodness of things when they come, and you will not be devastated when they leave you. You might say, well, I prefer to have something nice coming to me than something nice being taken away from me. Yes, of course, you prefer that. That's obvious, but it doesn't touch the deepest level of who you are. You still have preferences, of course. You'd rather be successful than not successful. I'd rather be healthy than ill. I'd rather have a good relationship than a bad relationship. But you're more likely to have a good relationship, in fact, very likely, when you come from your essence. Of course, there's still the other. So the important thing is the realization in your entire life. We've talked about relationships, and it is to realize not relationships, opinions, discussions, dialogues with people, whatever is being discussed is of secondary importance. Relationships, having a relationship or not having a relationship is of secondary importance. Whether you're successful in the world or failure, so-called, in the eyes of the world, or you have your own narrative. People have their own narratives. Say, I have failed. It's just a narrative. There's no, outside of the narratives, there's no failure. So, all these things are secondary. Primary is your state of consciousness that underlies it. So if you remember that, then you can pay attention to that. And where do you pay attention to that? In the only place where it arises, in the present moment. So what is my state of consciousness in this moment? That's a verbalized question, but you don't have to even verbalize it. Just remember to look there, to look within, to have that alertness in the background of your being, that from where you can, and that is one aspect of the ancient dictum from Greece that we talked about at Delphi, know thyself. Know thyself is one of the great inscription on the temple. Know thyself, and one aspect of that is to have that vigilance in the background so that you know how you speak to another, you know what kind of thoughts your mind is producing, you know what kind of emotion is arising at this moment. And so there's that awareness in the background. That is one aspect or one level of knowing yourself. There's the knowing in the background, and that knowing in the background is you as the awareness. And that is primary. That is primary in your life, to have that. Everything else is secondary. And it says know thyself as two levels. I just talked about having the awareness in the background. That means you know your patterns, you know your thoughts, you know your emotions, and then once you know them, they change. Very dysfunctional patterns tend to dissolve when there's an awareness behind it. So, and then you know yourself at the deepest level, you know yourself as consciousness. When you become still and aware, are you aware that you are aware at this moment? Can you feel that you are aware? Yes. That's knowing yourself at the deepest level, knowing yourself as awareness. So you can know the personality from the level of awareness. You know, these things you can explore. That level of knowing yourself you can explore in therapy situations. You can learn about yourself if you have a conscious therapist. Can be very helpful. You talk to the therapist, and the therapist can shed light, can help you to be more aware if the therapist is aware, and not just coming from accumulated knowledge. So in the therapy situation, what is healing in the therapy situation is the level of awareness between you and the therapist. And the therapist can help you be aware of those aspects of yourself, your personality, that could be obstacles to your arising presence without you knowing it. So in that sense, can be helpful to know yourself. Psychoanalysis can help you know yourself on the level of the self, but there are certain schools of therapy that cannot take you deeper. Some may. They remain on the level of examining the personality, the conditioned personality, in the belief that that's all there is to you. And so some form of therapy can even prevent you from going deeper because they would regard that as something weird. You shouldn't go there. I'll give you a pill if you're going there. Not the red one, the blue one. So you can go to a therapist. I had this wonderful moment of the deepest stillness, and I felt quite totally content, and it it was beautiful. And he says, oh, you must be denying reality. But I have a pill for that. You're not seeing your problems. So if you then, the way in which you look at the rest of your life, so that's just a slightly humorous statement. There's a post-retreat, your post-retreat life, and your pre-retreat life. It's not really like that, because even before you came here, there was already a lot of consciousness arising. But let's just put it like that. Now, your post-retreat life is where you treat every situation that arises as an opportunity for being present, for taking you into presence. And so there's always another level to whatever situation arises in your life. There is the level of the situation, and you're aware that the more essential level of the consciousness with which you meet the situation, and that is you. What is the consciousness with which you meet the situation? And the miraculous thing is, even on the level of form, the external level, you will experience transformations when you remember what is of primary importance in your life. Even without actively wanting to rearrange things on the level of form, now I need to do this in order to achieve that, so there's a place for that too. But without actively wanting to rearrange things on the level of form, your life situation, I call it, you will find that if you consistently bring what really matters, that level of awareness, into every situation, the way in which that situation unfolds subsequently will be very different from the way in which this very same situation would unfold if all you had to meet the situation were your egoic mind, its judgments and its reactivities. So there is undoubtedly a connection between your state of consciousness and how what you experience as your life, how it unfolds for you. There is undoubtedly a connection, not always an obvious one, not necessarily in the way that whatever happens you can immediately trace back to some thought you had. It doesn't work like that. But there is a connection. And if you bring consistently awareness into every situation or most situation, you might not always succeed. You may from time to time lose yourself in your mind again, and the ego may reassert itself from time to time. That's okay. But if you bring, the more awareness you bring in, the more you'll find that it influences the way in which you experience reality. And the way in which you experience reality, of course, is what is conventionally called my life. So it does change your life in ways that you cannot even foresee and see. It just after a while you notice an improvement in the way, not that you'll be free of challenges, they continue to come, but the state of consciousness with which you meet the challenges determines the way in which the situation now unfolds thereafter, from now on. So every situation nothing is predetermined how it's going to develop. There is an intimate connection when a situation arises in the form of a person or people or whatever is going on. And if you meet it with awareness, it will develop very differently from then on than if you meet it in a reactive egoic state that is antagonistic. You are in opposition to something, you internally, you deny it, or whatever it is, whatever the egoic state is. In other words, there's just the mind state. So, and that is a incredible thing to find, that if true change comes into your life, if you bring that new consciousness into your life, you can still consciously rearrange things. It's another matter. You can change your life on the conscious level, but more fundamentally, if you only change your life, if you only try to change your life on the surface level of things, I don't want to live here anymore, I don't like this city anymore, I don't like this house anymore, I need to move to another place, I need to move to a better climate, I need to go to, I can't stand to this. Of course, wherever you go, you find yourself. So ultimately, that doesn't really help. But if you bring in awareness, that truly changes things. And you may not immediately notice it, and sometimes you may not even realize that a situation that you brought awareness to then developed in a certain way that was actually harmonious and pleasant and brought back good things to you. You may not realize that if you had not brought that awareness to the situation, it would have developed in a very different way that would have brought more negativity into your life and more suffering. And so it's an amazing adventure to experiment with that in your life. So the practice is your daily life. That's the extension of the retreat. The retreat is within you. The essence of the retreat is awareness, presence. Always remember what is primary, and then what is secondary is okay. Some of it will deal with itself, and some of it you will deal with from the level of awareness. This is a good moment for allowing stillness to speak without words for a while. Try out, thank you for this bell. I will try out the new sound for our meditation now. Let's see. It has the Om symbol here, that's a good sign. Thank you for the bell. Very nice.